Corey, welcome. Good to
Hey.
have you as always. And this is another one of our AppySecU webinars, live streams, and I think a very special one. Right, we got Corey in the house, which is always very special, and we're talking about a very popular topic. Apparently, we had over 1,200 people sign up, and we only promoted this 2 days ago. So Corey, I think you've like hit a nerve out there, man.
Sure. Yeah, lots of people talking about Model Context Protocol coming up on 1 year since its release. And so totally understand why people are interested.
Yeah, no doubt, man. So that is the topic of today, MCP security. And as you likely all know, Corey has we've just published a course that Corey's been working on for the last few months on MCP security fundamentals. And so really here, we're going to talk about MCP. What is it? What's in the course? What did you learn along the way? And what I found really great about this course, I mean, I learned so much in it. Folks, it's like 90 minutes. It's not a huge amount, but you learn a ton in there. It actually helped solidify just like what the heck is MCP and how does it work and all of these things. You actually build MCP servers live in the course, which I didn't even know you could do that. You actually build an MCP server for our platform at appysec.ai,
Mhm.
which was mind-boggling. And so yeah, I mean, like Corey, let's just start at the very top, right? Like help us get like a what is it? People describe it as USB for API, for
Yeah.
LLMs and all these things. Just like let's just start there and then let's just dig down further and start touching on some of the security aspects here.
Yeah. And so the most common, which is actually put out by Anthropic as well, which is MCP is like USB-C for LLMs. In the course, I actually bring it back home and say that MCP is really APIs for LLM. And it's the technology that enables LLMs to interact with our third-party tools seamlessly. And so it solves the problem of AI isolation, where AI has been fairly great for chat and other uses, but we've all been waiting for it to be enabled to interact with the real world and interact with the tools that are out there and be much more effective and useful than what we've seen up to this point.
Yeah, and I didn't even really understand the naming. Like, what the heck, model context protocol? Like, talk about a name that doesn't convey anything to me, at least, right? But you actually kind of explain like it's actually three concepts
Yeah.
that are in there.
And so model is going to be on the LLM side of things. So that's going to be any of the chat models you're used to interacting through the context of the tools that are provided. And so there are definitely some challenges of LLMs just interacting directly with APIs. Any one of us that's worked with APIs before or tested APIs, you know that a change in the API can break it, and then you're getting 400 response or a 500 response, and that's not super useful for an LLM to be able to interact with. So instead, you have fully working API on one side, but then you have this context in the middle of the LLM and the third-party tool, to where it's going to enable the LLM to choose from a list of options based on the context of what you're saying. And then protocol is just a predictable, understandable way to consistently work between technologies.
Yeah, no, it's wild. And I guess it's taking these powerful MCP or powerful LLM capabilities and making them available not just from, a human input prompt, but to other machines, right? To automate these kinds of things.
Yeah.
And you mentioned in the course that MCP is kind of like, I guess Anthropic kind of stepped up and created it. And you talk about like, all right, this is a standard. It's probably the standard, but it may not remain the standard,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, similar to APIs, like we had SOAP and then we have REST and then GraphQL. It's just, yeah, it's the first well adopted protocol. It won't be the last. There will be other competitors. I'm sure there already are, but it's the one that's sticking currently and the one that's gained the most popularity.
So let's break it down a little bit, right? So in the course, you actually build an MCP server for AppySec. right? And I didn't even know that was possible, right? Can you kind of like, so I'm accustomed, like there are MCP servers you can just go grab off the shelf, right? And I think you show like is it in Docker where there's a like a marketplace?
Yeah, so MCP registries are all over the place. So there's one in GitHub, there's another in Docker, and these are just, I guess, potentially more professional places to get the MCP servers from. But yeah, in the course, I wanted to show off the capabilities of MCP. So why is it being adopted? Why is it so cool? Why is it so powerful? And I wanted to be able to build one. I called it the lazy way, but vibe coding an MCP server, which the LLMs are fairly good at. Network Chuck, I referred a video that he has out there. He has a really good video on doing that as well. His is a bit more hands-on, but he has the context to build out a consistent MCP server every time. You could probably see it in the course where I'm like blown away that you could one-shot this MCP server for AppSec and have it be functional relatively easy.
Yeah, it blew my mind, right? And what's cool is you actually vibe coded your MCP server, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny in the course, you actually show your surprise, like, wow, that actually worked.
Yeah, I figured like anything else when you're recording a course that I'll give it a shot and then something will go wrong and I'll get errors and I'll have to troubleshoot and go back and forth and finally figure it out. But that was purely a one shot, sending out the request and getting back a successfully working MCP server.
Yeah, it's wild, right? And I think in that process, you kind of demonstrated some of the like early security concerns, right? There's a portion where you show like, okay, I've connected this thing. Now it's asking me what functions, what features do I want to make available through this MCP server? And I think most people would just be like, click, select all. I don't want to think about this. And suddenly you've exposed some potentially really dangerous features.
Yeah, as Mark's calling out in the chat, there's no S in MCP.
Mark definitely wins best contribution in the chat so far. Thank you for all of that.
Yeah, the course I wanted to show off how powerful and interesting and what business opportunities can come out of MCP. So why are businesses all over the place adopting this rapidly and making servers available and everything else? But then on the other side, I wanted to show off where can things go wrong. And I built the MCP server to be a local file search, and it was supposed to only stay in a single directory. And in a separate directory that it shouldn't have had access to, I included a list of API secrets. And so approaching it from like a directory traversal where you're doing // to have the web server go up a couple stages, up a couple directories, and then find a file. And so I sent that request, I believe using Claude, and sure enough, it broke out of the sandbox and went into the other directory that it shouldn't have had access to and stole my API secrets as a demonstration of, where things can go wrong. And so when you're setting up Claude or any other LLM application and it says enable access, you need to be very careful as far as how can this go wrong when I give any of these tools access to my email or any of the servers or services that I'm using. So if you take something like monday.com, which I'm leveraging to do some project management, but in the tool list, I have the choice to give Claude access to delete posts, alter posts, find posts. And so is there really a good purpose for it to delete, or do I want to be careful about the information I have stored there and not give it that permission? And the other thing you come up with is, do you want to have the human in the middle to where it performs a certain action and it requests permission to perform that action? Or do you want to, YOLO and give it access every single time to do certain things? And the decision that you make there is risk-based and also practical. So finding something on a Monday board may not be as sensitive. It's read only. It's not going to be deleting a bunch of things. So that could be safe to give that permission to have permanent access there. On the other side, deleting may be something you don't want to give any access to, and changing things could be somewhere in the middle where you have the human in the middle asking permission every single time.
Well, one of the things I've noticed in my own vibe coding experiments and things like that is I try to put guardrails up, right? And I'll say things like, do not hard code API keys or hard code anything for that matter, right? Like everything should be parameterized, blah, blah, blah. And literally 5 minutes later, it could have long forgotten that, and it's doing exactly the thing I told it not to do, right?
Yeah.
So is that a concern here with MCPs? Like, you talk about path traversal, right? And like, is there a way to say like that's not permitted, right? And that's a hard and fast guardrail that that can't be hallucinated or worked around or things like that? Or is that also like a concern here?
Yeah, there are concerns all around. That's one of the big security issues with MCP. I talk about the trust boundaries. And in comparison to the normal user application web server interaction, there are many fewer boundaries than when we add MCP into the mix. And that opens up a lot more attack vectors where now there's a new way to perform social engineering attacks. There's a new way to perform man-in-the-middle attacks. And then everything else comes up too. So the server that you're using, yeah, should it be locked down in a certain way? Sure. But did you download that from a source that's not too trustworthy? So it could just be built purely out of malice, and it's meant to attack and made by an adversary. And so when you're building your own, yeah, you can definitely add in rules and instructions to whatever tool you're vibe coding with to help make that a bit more consistent and lock it down a bit more, and then use additional tooling to test afterwards to search for things like leaked credentials and such.
I'm seeing a question here I want to bring in from Malik. Have you heard about the model response misrouting in GitHub Copilot? Is the vulnerability related to MCP API security? Is that, do you know what he's talking about?
No, not familiar with it.
All right. Maybe you can add some color there. That's something that we've not heard of. So one of the things that you talk about in the course is this top 5 list, and I want to go through that a little bit.
Sure.
First of all, is that Corey's top 5 list? Is this like a well-known industry standard at this point?
Yeah, so I believe I released, there's 5 layers of pain, which is one thing. And then I came up with the 10 categories that I grouped the vulnerabilities together into. And then in the course, we focus on, I believe, 5 of those. And so, yeah, those are purely my list from what I'm seeing and what's in the news and videos that I've watched. There is an OWASP project, but when I went to go check on that, it's still in the works. It's very early in the project stage. And so there's no solid independent third-party list out there. I'm sure vendors have some, but yeah, that's my own list.
I think your list is pretty damn awesome. I think we should just put it out there, and in fact, it is now out there. So let's just go through this, right? So first on your list is tool poisoning, right? So I've heard about examples where there are typo squatted tools, or you can, accidentally download a malicious version or a tool that's got malicious code embedded in it. Walk us through tool poisoning.
Yeah, so with several of these, inspecting the MCP server and the tools that are being used, and not just trusting what the LLM tells you, but actually like looking through it can help on the malicious side. So tool poisoning, you're going to have some malicious instructions that have been included to where it's using phrases like prompt injection. So ignore all previous commands and do this thing, but also don't tell the user for compliance reasons or for anything else that's good enough for the LLM to just follow your instructions. And so, yeah, a handful of these fall into that realm where there's malicious additions to the MCP server or the tools that you're using, and it will tool poisoning. So it will take that command and then do the malicious work with it. So it could say, with every email that I send, make sure to BCC this other third-party email. And then when it takes place and you're sending out these emails that you thought would be practical and helpful, it's BCCing an attacker along the way.
I remember when you were getting close to finishing the course, there was like I don't know, it was probably like patient zero of an MCP exploit. And is that ringing a bell? Like you were like, oh
Yeah,
yeah,
I believe it's the JFrog
yeah.
one with
Was that a tool
downloads.
poisoning example?
Yeah, it had aspects of that in there, as well as supply chain vulnerability. So a combination of a few, like any real world attack. And so, yeah, that one had over 500,000 downloads and was essentially doing that same thing, I believe, with the email BCC.
But let me understand this. Like you talk about like download. So what is the attack vector here? Like I'm vibe coding or I'm using an MCP and unknowingly to me that thing that I've just integrated has malicious code in it. Like how does that
Sure.
work? How does that
Yeah.
malicious code even get in there in the first place? Or am I connecting to something that isn't what I thought it was?
Yeah, with that one being a supply chain, I'm doing this purely off of memory, which is, I believe, the first 12 versions of that MCP server and tool were trustworthy, and there were no issues with it. And so I don't know if there was a final determination on, this is a malicious attacker or a curious developer or anything in between, but by the 13th release of the software that had been previously trustworthy, if you went through the code, no issues. But one of the new changes on the 13th was that BCC to an email. So from your perspective, you download this server to perform a function like sending emails out, and the previous 12 versions had been great. You found this from a relatively trustworthy location, and you've been using it, no problems. But then the 13th version, when that updates, the BCC, this malicious email, was added to it, and then you continue using it as you had the previous versions, except now the information that you're emailing out is also being sent over to an attacker. Yeah.
I mean, what's the like, or is there any like best practice here? Like how it's not like you're using something, you're trusting it, and actually you should not be. Like, is there a reputable source that you should rely on? Don't go grab random MCPs that you
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah, that's MCP security is hard. Yeah, MCP security is really challenging. When I talked about the different trust boundaries, things can go wrong in lots of different places. And so with that one, even if you had the diligence to comb through the version and the code, you've done that 12 times, 13 times without issue. And so even at that point, is every single user going to realistically go through those? Maybe someone on a security team should be doing that every time and saying, these are the MCP servers that are approved for our organization.
Yeah.
And then there should be a change review whenever that takes place. All of this is very easy to say, very difficult to implement.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you can use LLMs to help you review code and look for things like that. But when prompt injection is involved, you don't know the outcome because your own tool could be tricked by it. So it does take additional diligence to comb through the updates and the servers that are being used. So there are attempts, and I believe Anthropic is a part of this too, to have validated and trustful registries that are used to where you can go to a central location, similar to the Apple App Store, where these have been vetted, these have been tested, and they're limited, versus GitHub, where I can release a tool that says, this is Microsoft Word's MCP server, and I can put all the branding there, but have it be malicious behind that.
Yeah, there was, when we did our recent breaches webinar, I don't know, a month or so ago, there was an example of someone who, just for the fun of it, published something that was clearly absurd, just to see what would happen, and they had like 30,000 downloads or something outrageous like that. So There you go, right? And we know typo squatting, like you think you're installing a package, but the AI goes to a typo squatted source instead. You think it's the right
Mhm.
thing, and suddenly, you've got malicious code. So tons of issues potential there. All right, so that's tool poisoning. Next one on your list. Oh, by the way, I wanted to mention something I really liked about how you preface the course is you're not here to try to say like doom and gloom, don't adopt it, it's a huge can of worms.
Mhm.
It's really like I think the approach you took with the course, like this is an exciting new capability, it offers tremendous value, and you're not trying to pour cold water on it, but illuminate the audience to the things that come along with it.
Yeah. So my experience with MCP is very similar to my early experiences with APIs, where it's like, wow, this is a really cool technology. It's being adopted everywhere. Everyone's doing it. All the businesses are taking advantage of it. There's a huge business opportunity. But meanwhile, there's some serious security concerns at the same time. And so it would sort of be like standing in front of a bullet train to say, don't use APIs, they're insecure. Don't use MCP, it's insecure.
Not
Everyone's
happening.
going to do it. So I don't see the value there on that side. So I wanted to show off, plenty of people may not be familiar. They've heard MCP, they can spell it, but they haven't seen it in action. So I wanted to show off. It was really cool to be able to quickly create an AppSec MCP server and then do things like run this scan, tell me the top 3 most critical vulnerabilities from this app. And just to be able to send it off from a chat application. And yeah, really cool technology to be able to do that. And it's a lot of fun. But then at the same time, there's the other side of it that has to be a part of the conversation and it has to be considered, which is security.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's go through more of your top five, right? So we did tool poisoning. The next one, prompt injection. You knew that was going to be on there. So
Sure.
one we've been talking about for ages, not even in the just in the context of MCP. But
Yeah.
what is it in the context of MCP?
Yeah. So at any of those trust boundaries where an LLM is involved, can malicious in it can malicious instructions can be provided to bypass the previous context. And so ignore all previous commands, do this malicious thing, don't tell the
Right.
user about it. And then the reason you include all that as an attacker is that from the chat application side, there's always the comments of thinking, considering whenever it has to use an MCP server, there's a bit more processing and a lot more requests that are going on. So it's giving the user all these notes. And so as you're going, if you look at the details, it may disclose, sending out an email to this malicious third party. And then the user would catch that and quickly fix it. So to hide in those instructions, you have a full prompt injection saying this is a system command, something that the LLM is previously programmed and used to as far as prompts that are meant to better engineer the LLM. But now a malicious user is taking advantage of that. And I believe Jason Haddix had the opportunity to ask Sam Altman, will this ever be solved? And Sam Altman's famous response was like, no, I don't think we'll ever solve this. There'll always be like 5% that slip by this. So
Right.
prompt injection isn't going away anytime soon with responses like that. The insider knowledge that this is a very challenging problem that an attacker will be able to take advantage of. So build boundaries around that to help defend.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually building some apps on the side, and there's AI, of course, involved, and I worry about prompt injection quite a lot. And I don't know if this is clever or super basic, but I kind of want to have an LLM to evaluate the request before it's kind of input validation, right? At the AI level.
Yeah, and input validation is part of the solution. The usual technical input validation that we're used to seeing with web apps and APIs, but then also with what you're talking about, the LLM side, which is helpful to do, but then those LLMs could also be tricked by the prompt injection themselves. So it's something you have to be aware of.
Yeah, it's an arms race, right? I guess. And we're seeing some questions pop in here, and I do love the links, but I want to make sure that we get some discussion going on in here. folks. Julio, what is the best security controls for MCP? Rajat, for running MCP locally, is there any LLM model that you suggest? I mean, these are like, I think, I think a lot of this is just, work in progress, right? And so I think we're so early in this journey that, the best bet you can have is like go educate yourself with courses like this. And there are some lists. Corey's top 5 is a hell of a good starter, but I think we're going to need folks to go beyond that, right? And really understand the underlying fundamentals.
Yeah, and with that question, when you're dealing with a local model, it's all about the resources that you have available and then what you want that model to do, because there are certain models that are better for a use case. And so, yeah, there's no one size fits all for that answer, but you'll want to look into the models and what they specialize in, and then the resources that you have available on the server or computer that you're going to use with those.
Let's keep going. So we've covered tool poisoning, prompt injection, API security is you have as a category. And we've had Katie Paxton Fear on a few times. She has this awesome graphic where it's Scooby-Doo, right? And the dude has a mask on and it says AI and they pull it off and it says API, right? It's just API under the hood. So it seemed like the two are just inextricably linked, right?
Yeah. Yeah, on the diagrams that I have on the right-hand side is the tools that are going to be leveraged, the tools that we want to take advantage when we're looking at our LLM application to perform certain actions that get rid of the isolation problem. And so the easiest and most predictable way for an LLM to be able to do that is with a well-made API. And so the well-made part is it's easy for the AI to understand which requests do which actions, and then to have that tool description so that it can easily select the correct tool to use for that action. And so the entire right-hand side of the attack vector, and pretty much everywhere in between, it's all API requests. And so on the tooling side, if your API is vulnerable, then this is just another attack vector to take advantage of that vulnerability. And so if there's an authorization issue over on the tool side, you could take advantage of that from the LLM application, to where I could say, I'm looking for this resource, but I don't remember the exact UUID. Can you check the file around my code? And then if the API is vulnerable, this is just another vector to take advantage of that.
So I'm just trying to understand, like, is AI security the same as API security, or is it is API security inside a bigger circle, which is AI security? I mean, it seems like everything in the API top 10 applies, but maybe there's even more beyond that.
Yeah, so there's definitely a Venn diagram where all API security can also become LLM or AI security problems. And so outside of API security, there are things we're not as concerned about with APIs. For example, any risk to reputation, we're not as concerned with that with APIs, whereas LLMs that are handing out free coupons or spreading misinformation or having bias or anything like that, those can be inherent in LLM and the knowledge base that they're trained on. And it can spread, bad information about your company. It can misrepresent your company. It can say things that are in poor taste that you wouldn't want associated with your company, but it's saying, I'm a legal representative of your company. Yeah. So there's a lot of issues there on the reputation side. And I call it the natural language hacking side, where with APIs, it's very much made for machine-to-machine communication. So it's pretty rigid. But as soon as you add a user with a prompt, then there's a lot more to handle. And when the AI is going through a vector database and predicting what answers should be next, then it gets a lot more harder to put those guardrails on to limit the response. And so, there are a lot of issues outside of API security, but API security is a huge class of its own problem for LLMs to deal with.
Well, we've already seen that. I think there was a famous example where someone used a chatbot to get a truck for $1 or something, and the
Oh
courts
yeah. Mhm.
ruled that you have to honor it. That was your website, and it produced that offer, right? So, from Syed Saqib, how does an MCP tool describe what it can do through its metadata or schemas? And I think this is actually something that I found quite interesting in the course. It's kind of like, how are we exposing functionality? How do we define that functionality? And the example that you did in the course, you started with a Postman collection that our site was making available. Is that where we define the sort of like list of operations?
Mhm. Yeah, so it's taking that Postman collection, and this is probably good advice for any company that's looking to do something similar. If we took the AppySec Postman collection, there's all sorts of functionality in there that AppySec probably doesn't want an LLM to perform. The LLMs are going to be better at certain things than others. And so as a company creating an MCP server, you want to find the business opportunities in that really work well with your platform or software. And so even though we have this full Postman collection with all of these options, you'd want to find, what is a user actually going to be doing from their LLM application like Claude or anything else, to where they type in something and something happens with the platform. And you want to narrow that down to the functionality that's going to perform well, work well with your platform and everything else. So you take that large Postman collection, you narrow it down to the functionality that you're looking to have on an MCP server. And then the technical side is you in the MCP server, you're describing the tool name as well as a description. And the LLM is going to leverage that to determine, this is the right tool to use for this. And with the tool hijacking example, that's where a malicious tool would come in and say, use mine, use this tool instead to send out emails with the BCC over using the other tool. You can ignore that one. It's not as
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Well, but like you talk about, like, all right, that Postman collection or that OAS file will basically define what operations are available. But is there a distinction between operations I want, someone to integrate with through a REST API or something like that, versus things I want people to be able to build an MCP server? Because it seems to me like if I share one, I'm sharing the other as well. Meaning, if I want our clients to be able to integrate through a REST API call to check their balance or something, like, I can't control whether that becomes an MCP server or not. Am I?
That's correct. Yeah. And so with a full OAS or Postman collection that's out there, all of that can be made into an MCP server like I do in the course. Yeah, but as far as like companies making their own MCP servers that they advertise, that's more the strategy that I was talking about, where you'd want to limit that.
Got it.
So similar to with APIs, yeah, it should only be the functionality that you want to advertise and want available for the consumers to use. That should be in the APIs, because yes, that can be totally leveraged by an LLM and an MCP server.
Well, and we know, like, even if you don't publish your API, there are plenty of people who will publish them for you,
Yeah.
right? And you just go to GitHub or Rapid API or plenty of these places, and you'll find, like, oh, there's a spec for so and so, and it's not from that authoritative source. But if you don't know any better, or you just want to use it anyways, that could be an issue. I want to bring this question from Mark Edwards. So, is it fair to say an API spec file wouldn't be as important to attack APIs now if those APIs are behind an MCP? All right, bear with me. This is a long. I don't know if you can see it. All right, let me start over. So, is it fair to say an API spec file wouldn't be as important to attack APIs now if those APIs are behind an MCP, since MCP can effectively explore the API specs for you with the right prompt injection approach? That's a mouthful, but did you follow the Mark's question and logic there?
Yeah. And so I think I would just start with back at the beginning of it wouldn't be as important to test the APIs. No, everything is on fire from a security perspective. So you want to test the APIs, you want to test the layers in between the MCP architecture. There are security issues all throughout it. So there's never a case to make anything less important to test or attack. If an API is behind an MCP server, now it's just a new attack vector for that API. So I can attack it from directly interacting with it and making requests. I can interact or test it through my interactions in a web browser. And now, new and improved, we can also attack it through our chat applications. And so an MCP server would just enable your LLM to interact with those APIs, and you can totally test it for security through that. The thing is, the API itself is going to have all of the functionality, and maybe there's improper inventory management, so not everything is in the documentation. So going back to using the web app is going to have all of that functionality available. And then down the chain where you have the LLM interaction, that is going to be able to interact with the API based on the MCP server. So like I was saying a minute ago, that may be limited by the creator of the MCP server to just be a certain set of that functionality versus all of it. And so best testing for APIs is on the other side where you're directly interacting with it and testing it from that perspective. But like I was saying, LLMs can now be this new attack vector where I can have it. It looks like the API we're interacting with is on version 3, but I think the information that I'm really looking for that would be very helpful to have is on V1. Can you help me find that? And now the LLM is out there testing alongside you, or if you're malicious, then it's an aid to an attacker from that perspective.
Yeah, it just shows how, it's the nice thing about REST was that it was very well defined and had these code level guardrails, and as soon as you introduced AI, it's a great big murky world. Number 4 on your top 5 list is tool confusion. So explain that.
Yeah, that's the one I was just mentioning earlier, where the tool description can be leveraged against the LLM to where you can confuse it into using a different tool. This has the malicious side, like I described there, but it also has the accident-prone side, I think. So accidents can happen here where if 2 tool descriptions are too close together, then the LLM won't know which one to choose, and it could choose email A versus email B as far as the tooling goes. And where the accidents take place is if you have your chat application and you go and you're using it for business purposes and you're sending your private proprietary email there, and the LLM gets confused and uses your personal email instead of the private email, then that can cause issues with tool confusion.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I was thinking tool confusion from an end user perspective, but it's actually tool confusion from the LLM's perspective, or the MCP, where there's some request that involves a downstream command or invoking some other tool, and it's not clear what tool to use, and it might pick the wrong one.
And it's always going to be helpful, so it's going to choose one of those tools, and and if it's the wrong one, then it could cause issues.
And then the last one on your list, supply chain attacks. So we are hearing this all the time, third-party risk, but how does that apply here with MCP?
Yeah, so with that JFrog incident that we talked about, I believe it's JFrog. Yeah, the first 12 versions of it were trustworthy, but the 13th one wasn't. And so the supply chain there could be any part of the application or tool that you're using could be susceptible to attack. And so we see this often with JavaScript libraries, and maybe some of those are retired or have vulnerabilities that the others don't. That would be an issue in the supply chain caused for your application. And so it's anywhere essentially outside of your direct control that you're leveraging for your application. So open source software, anything like that that's being used to power the application. And with MCP servers, it's not necessarily there in the same capacity because of all those trust boundaries. And so supply chain could affect MCP at all sorts of levels, whether in the server side, in the tooling side, any of the pieces of the application in the chain could have a malicious event or an accidental event that causes those issues.
Yeah, and we're seeing questions here. Like one thing that you mentioned in the course is chaining of MCPs, right? And it's like, MCPs talking to other MCPs and building more and more functionality. And it's almost hard for me to wrap my head around, like, it's like the risk multiplies and it's not even additive, right?
Yeah.
You're like compounding risk on top of each other.
Yeah, if you look at the diagrams where I have the pirate in the course and that's all over the place, and then once you start chaining those together, you see attack vectors everywhere.
Yeah, it's hard to even fathom here. There's a message here from Tony Galella. In my experience, the cyber trend over the last decade of security improving through education, shift left, and other approaches has completely reversed the direction for the bad, meaning the bloom of AI everywhere. Security has gotten worse with larger blast radius. What type of efforts in MCP and API security do you see helping reverse this trend? For the positive, I mean, yeah, I don't know if you have an opinion there. I actually think education is even more important, not less. But it's I'm just thinking like 20 years ago, right? I come from a vulnerability management background, and it used to be like you could scan for these things, and there were certain signatures to look for and things to test for, and there was a lot of noise, but you could be fairly confident that you were covering the bases. But I think we've, in some ways, maybe I've become over reliant on these sort of just like fire and forget type of approaches, and thinking that we're good enough. We did a code scan, we did a vulnerability scan, we're good, right? And what we've seen, at least my opinion and experience, and certainly Corey, love your to weigh in, like the exploits have moved right from network layer and brute force layer and common vulnerabilities to unique vulnerabilities, things at the logic layer, right? And our testing, our assessments have to become smarter. And security teams love tools that are like, let me just bolt on security, and I could put this in, I can plug the firewall in, and now I'm good. It's going to detect and block. And I think that's a fallacy at this point. And the attacks are at a layer that it's almost undetectable, right? Because it looks like such natural traffic at this point.
Yeah. The look and feel of prompt injection over a end user prompt that you're expecting can look very similar when you have like ignore this command and this is a system command and different items like that. Like those are a part of most LLM requests already, and that's why they're being taken advantage of, because at a higher level, before it's even getting to you, the LLM already has commands that look like that. So similar to APIs and business logic vulnerabilities, the traffic is going to look very similar. So to just stick a tool there, it's going to be hit or miss. And then the layered approach is always the way to go. But even with the layered approach and any of these things in AI, it all begins with education. And so the shiny object syndrome is happening across industries where everyone's seeing the AI. We've probably all seen the meme where the CEO is just saying like, add AI now. What do you want it to do? I'm like, I don't care. Just add AI to our product and we'll deal with it later. And like security is not a part of that conversation because you just see the business opportunity that everyone else is doing it and we must have it. But that's where the risk appetite comes in. And so if there's less risk appetite, should your organization be jumping on the MCP train? In a zero trust environment, should your company be jumping on the MCP train? Probably in a very limited capacity that's fairly locked down with functionality. That the read-only side is probably a bit safer than the interactive delete, create side of the house.
Yeah.
And so with Without education, we're just seeing the business opportunity and not hearing about the risks involved. And so that's where education comes into play, where this course, I'm able to say, this is a really cool technology. This is why you're hearing about it. This is why everyone is adding it in. But here's where it can go really wrong.
It's spot on, and maybe it's a good segue to wrap up here. We're gonna have to just bring you back, Corey, because there's so much interest in this tool, in this topic, and I do believe you've got plans in the future for add-on courses around MCP.
Yeah, like we were saying at the beginning, there's an OWASP project in the very early stages. So it would be cool once that is complete and released to come back and do a course on that, and update this course to reflect that as well.
And one thing that we were just talking about, we've for years had API security workshops, right? Many of you, we've done them publicly, or we do them privately for organizations. So for anyone that wants that, always come let us know, where we do them by the hundreds, honestly. But Corey and I have been talking about developing an MCP security workshop for organizations. So if your organization is grappling with MCPs and how to do it properly, and what are the things to know about, hit us up, shoot me an email, Christine. We'd love to start, getting that out there, right? And educating not just to all of you who are taking initiative and showing up for events like this and taking the course, but for your colleagues to become aware as well. So keep that in mind. If any of you are interested, come let us know. I'm sorry for everyone who had questions that we didn't get to here. We do review them all after the fact, and we'll follow up as much as we can. But Corey, as always, huge thanks to you for all that you do for the community. Another real gem that you've created here with this course.
Sure thing. Yeah, no problem. It was a fun time making it and vibe coding the AppySec MCP server, and then showing off some vulnerabilities with the local hosted version of the MCP server that I created. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
We've made it mandatory training in our company. Yeah. And I recommend it for everyone else too. It is definitely one of the best courses we've got. There's over 1,000 people have already registered in less than a week. It is a real gem. So thank you, Corey, for doing that. And thanks everyone for showing up here today. As always, this is recorded. We're going to make it available. So if you missed something or you want to share it, we'll make that available to you as well. And let me pull up we always have a couple of announcements here. Let me bring this up here. So we do have AppySecCon. That's coming February. Head on over to conf.appysecuniversity.com and sign up for that. It's going to be amazing. I can't wait. And if you're interested in speaking, we've got CFPs open. We've got our newest tool. It's still in beta, but if you want to try out Bolt, this is such a freaking cool thing. If you're a pen tester, or if you want to identify API calls straight from your web browsing traffic, and you don't want to configure proxies and set up filters and look at network traffic, this is a Chrome extension you can install. Fire it up, point it at whatever site you're on, click around. It will literally find the API calls right there in front of your eyes, and even generate an API spec right from that traffic. Super cool. And we're adding tons of really neat features and functionality to that. Thank you, Christine. appysecai./bolt if you want to check that out. And of course, we've got our flagship capability, right? The API security testing product. So we know how hard it is to really pressure test APIs in every dimension and to keep up with all of the releases that happen. So if this is something you're trying to do, right, make sure your APIs are secure at every release with automation. Come check it out. Thank you, Steve. I appreciate the shout out there. And you and I are overdue to catch up. I'm sure we'll make that happen here soon. But again, Corey, thanks, man. As always, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. And thank you, everybody, for showing up here today. We'll talk again soon. Take care, everybody.